I've always like when people ask me my superpower, I always go, "Oh, I can speak every language in the business." And it's truly like the best operators can. Like they can have a very deep conversation with product. They can have a very deep conversation with finance and take whatever they learn back to go to market and like streamline the whole thing.
Welcome to RevOps Rockstars, in pursuit of unicorns. I'm David Carnes.
And I'm Jarin Chu. Join us as we interview RevOps leaders to explore the challenges they have faced, the biggest lessons they've learned, and what they think makes a RevOps rockstar.
This show is brought to you by OpFocus, on a mission to help companies run their businesses better by letting you focus on growth while we scale your operations. Let's get this show on the road.
Today's guest to the podcast is a go-to-market and customer leader. He's a senior global go-to-market and operations executive who has a proven record of delivering enduring value to shareholders. He's also got deep experience guiding growth stage enterprise SaaS companies to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We've got the VP of Revenue Operations at Formstack, Daniel Swimm. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you so much. You made my background sound pretty great, so thank you.
Well, we're going to start off maybe making you feel a little more vulnerable here. And we love learning about something that you had to learn through all of this experience you've had in RevOps the hard way. Give us something juicy, a good story, perhaps.
Yeah. I think the thing I had to learn the hard way is it doesn't have to be perfect, right? I think we in RevOps are always trying to make things new, better, and it's always an evolving system here in the business. And I think early on in my career, I found myself trying to make it perfect, right? And it just didn't work. So as a RevOps leader, we're always pitching to the business, hey, how do we make this better? How do we help your team? What can we do next to help evolve where we're going? So for me, it was very much learning through mistakes of trying to be perfect. I was trained in finance, so I'm trying to tick and tie to the last dollar and cents early in my career, but I've learned 80% of the way there is probably the right thing to solve for in an ops role, because you can get 80% of the answer right and know the right strategic direction that you lead the business to.
Were you the kind of person who would tweak your spreadsheets right up until the very last minute of presenting?
Oh yeah, I was a banker, so like formatting is something that's drilled into my soul very deeply. So, tick and tie, perfectly formatted. And then, throughout my career, I've learned that that can be a little waste of time sometimes.
And I want to tie it back to your original answer, which is how did you then learn to not need to make it perfect? What was the benefit you had to just say, hey, this is good enough for me to share and present?
Yeah, I think when you're in such a fast moving environment in some of these SaaS companies, you have to move fast to survive, right? And the business is hungry for answers. So you can't sit there and tick and tie and take days on things. Sometimes those decisions are needed in hours. And that's kind of for me, and as I've grown in my leadership and have larger teams, you try to coach folks that way too, which is we don't need to tie the numbers to the finance model. We're not finance, right? We're ops. So 80% of the way there is going to be just fine.
So Dan, your title is VP of RevOps. What does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, RevOps is one of these functions, right? That it means something different at every company. So I think that's a great question. So the role that I've taken on at Formstack is very much focused right now on sales, marketing, and partner operations. I think my scope in other companies has been called full lead to revenue. So, I think in my career, I've taken on this shape of an athlete and I just run to where the business needs me always. So in this role, I focus a little bit more on the top of the funnel than I have in the past. So it's a good opportunity to continue to sharpen some of my marketing skills as well.
And how do you measure success?
Yeah, I think so I've been in Formstack about 4 months. So we're still very much early on in building out the team and building out how we're going to structure ourselves. At this company, I think it's really just about getting our sales and marketing teams revamped and accelerated for growth. So putting the right systems in place, putting the right structures, putting the right accountability around metrics and process So I think that's, as I talk to, my boss, the COO, in terms of what we're measuring success for me and my team, I think those are some of the key metrics this year, at least.
Must be interesting to decide, like how long. So you said you're 4 months in, 5 months in, how long to wait before making changes. Must be an interesting thing to sift through.
Yeah, well, so I think for me, the thing I've always done is I've trusted my gut. I have enough context so far in my career to know what looks good and what doesn't when you get there. So very early on in Formstack, we just found that the team was a little underskilled for where we need to go and didn't have some of the right things that you would expect in a maturing RevOps organization. So we had to make some hard decisions in terms of talent, and we did that about 3 months in. And now we've finally started to hit our footing, and we're starting to hire some new roles into the team to help us accelerate that growth.
So we see that over and over as companies need to scale. So they take a big round of funding and the expectations to grow are there. And then they realize perhaps they need to upgrade a few of these or just reorganize the team, bring on. And that's especially true after acquisitions, where you may have multiple sets of the same role and not have other roles that are important to continue growth. An example being like an architect, bringing an architect on. So instead of a cost center, how do you tie revenue ROI to your role and to your team?
Question. Revenue ROI. So what I've always had my team think about, and I think it's, in my opinion, of course, is what makes some of the best RevOps teams out there, is that you tie your team to the number and you feel partnership with the organization, whether that be through marketing or through sales. So in some of the constructs and team structures I've put together, there's some level of a commercial operations function that serves as a deal desk that partners with the sales team to process and build velocity through the selling motion. That team is always tied to the number and tied to the number of their divisions or regions that they support. So very easy to measure. Marketing ops team, same way, tied to the marketing performance and goals for marketing. Customer teams, really kind of the net retention number and helping them run the right plays and giving them the right insights about customers to make sure that we have the predictive measures in place to make sure that we're ahead of churn.
Yeah. So Formstack has about 320 employees now.
Yes.
You took a private equity investment back in November 2021. I'm curious, like what size RevOps team do you have at this point in time?
Yeah, so we're just about 12 folks when I got here. Obviously, we made some changes to talent. I think we'll be about 10 by the time I rehire some of those roles. Obviously, we're a small and mighty team. There's a couple more roles I'd love to have that we're just not ready for at this point in time, but we will as we continue to scale some of our top line. But yes, we are private equity backed by Silversmith Capital and PSG. So there are some growth expectations by our institutional capital.
Yeah, I bet. That's great. And how do you determine the right balance of in-house versus outsourced work?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question. It was actually one of the questions our CEO, Chris Byers, asked me when I was coming onto Formstack. So how I thought about it in the past, and I really think about what we did at Duck Creek was you technically take a look at what you have in terms of true hard skills in the business and where you need expert support. So I always go back to this situation where we implemented our CPQ. At Duck Creek, I didn't have any CPQ talent. So this was something that we need to have help from the outside and then continue to bring someone to ride along with us and do some staff augmentation along the way with some true CPQ expertise in-house and really focus folks who we had on staff on things that are closer to the institutional knowledge of the business, because that's hard to coach up in terms of consultants. So the more opportunities we get to plug in consultants along the way, we have some support here at Formstack. Those folks are focused on stuff that don't require that knowing the deep ins and outs of the business. And that's really where we're getting a ton of our lift.
So it sounds like you're hiring. Do you have open positions on the RevOps team?
Oh, thank you. So you're allowing me to do a plug here? That's great.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about more of my team structure, but we're building out a performance analytics and planning function within RevOps right now. That's something we didn't have here at Formstack. So looking for really kind of a hands-on leader at the director level to come in and help me build out that vision, and also hire a few folks from an analyst and senior analyst level to help them get on the ground, partner with our senior leaders in marketing and sales and success to really give them the information, drive the insights, and then the actions into the business that we need to drive.
Well, it seems like there's some talent in the market right now. So, I'm
Yeah, it's
optimistic for
unfortunate.
you.
You wake up every day and there's more companies, making some cuts. I mean, we had to make the hard decision too, and it's never easy. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to move businesses forward and do that efficiently. I think that's the new key word that everybody's using these days instead of grow at all costs.
In speaking with you in advance of our podcast, I got the feeling that your MO is very GSD, or get shit done. And we know when RevOps teams GSD, we end up adopting or being tasked with other cool, corporate level initiatives that may or may not neatly fit into, that predefined RevOps function. You mentioned that your RevOps function is more top of funnel, sales, marketing, partner ops. I'm wondering if you are, as a result, as a leader, or your function is involved in some other kind of cross-functional initiatives, be that around planning, be that around different kinds of opportunities for acquisition that you might be involved in.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question. We do. We like to get shit done. That's kind of the mantra on the team. And I had this, I should have thought ahead of this, but my coffee cup that says do your job, right? So that's kind of the big things we like to talk about here. I think it's just the nature of the role, and it's really about building the connective tissue across the organization. And that's really the role that excellent RevOps teams play, because you can speak so many different languages. You are the one team within the organization that can be multilingual across product, across sales, across finance, right? So yes, we're very deeply involved in our planning. So working with finance and building those interlocks across the organization to make sure that we have the right investments to support growth in all the areas of the business. Obviously, I have a background in banking and private equity, so I just naturally get thrown into acquisition conversations. So those are always fun. And then, the most important thing about the acquisition is integration. I've seen good ones, I've seen bad ones, and I've seen really bad ones. So a lot to learn from there. But obviously, pricing and packaging is another partnership motion between often product and finance and ops from a go-to-market perspective. So there's plenty of areas where we've touched upon in the various roles I've had.
Let me peek behind the scenes a little bit.
Yep.
When you say that you get pulled into the different opportunities for acquisitions, how do you get involved? What are you typically asked to look at, either for that potential company or for your own readiness to be able to integrate?
Yeah, no. So this is where I get to put on my old banker and private equity hat. So I get excited because early on in my career, I always thought I wanted to go back, but I've just, become so ingrained in being a good operator at this point. Really, it's evaluating, at least from the roles that I've had, it's evaluating some of these companies as you would an investment, as if you were in private equity, right? So it's looking at the key fundamentals of the business, understanding the product, and really having an investment thesis for how that's going to fit into your company. And then furthermore, how does that integrate and go forward? So very early on in the process, you're just getting an understanding, you're doing a deep dive. A lot of the times I'm brought into the product and go-to-market conversations. Now, I'm not a technologist, so I can't go through and give you a true read as to how that looks from a technical perspective, but I can go in and understand how that looks to a user or to a customer, how that fits our go-to-market strategy, and how we then tuck that into the future rollout of how we're going to sell, market, and take this product to market, whether it be part of a broader product portfolio or be a standalone company. Like, there's different ways that you could run that acquisition depending on your strategy. So those are some of the things that I have generally got involved in as part of the inorganic strategy.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to bring in your experience having been on the investor side. And one thing we're very curious about when we speak with RevOps leaders is how they typically communicate effectively to the board, tell that narrative. I'm interested in having you share a little bit about how you do it today, and also what are some of the things you've learned when you need to interface with the board, given that experience of having been on the board yourself on the investor side.
Yeah, no, I think that's always the fascinating thing is I've been on both sides of the table, which is really unique, and have given me a new perspective when you prepare for a board meeting as to what the expectations are and what the board wants to hear. And I think at the end of the day, the board really wants to hear, yes, like how you're performing, but how do we help you? Right. I think that's the most important thing, whether that be, yes, we're challenged in these areas and here's what we're thinking and here's where we need your support, or here are some opportunities that we'd love to exploit in the market. And we'd love introductions to these companies and to these people that you know on these boards. So those are some of the more effective uses of the board. Now, obviously, like we went through it this week. We're deep dive. I mean, we're not, our board deck's not even done at this point. We have a board meeting next week, so that's always fun, right? But it's, you know, thinking about the storyline that the board, that you're telling the board, the supporting materials, and then, you know, any follow-up that might come out of that to make sure that you're prepared to have that conversation. So, yeah, I might be a little tired after my board prep this week, but we do have a revenue kickoff next week, which would be it's a great opportunity for us to get some good energy going for it.
Since you're going through that prep process yourself, would you have any tips that you would want to share with fellow RevOps leaders who are also preparing for board decks? What are the kind of things you would want to suggest, either in terms of the order in which you look at your preparation materials or the way you craft the narrative during the presentation?
Yeah, so I think I've worked for small private companies, large private companies, and also publicly traded companies. And some of the best board management that I've seen from a CFO or an executive leadership team is really kind of a less is more approach in terms of just a really tight talk track and story with very, very clear and precise metrics that support that. And then you really are spending the conversation on dialogue. It's less about going step by step through some of the slides. You send that for a pre-read, and now you're having dialogue around, okay, well, we did the pre-read on these slides, and here's some of the key topics we want to get into. And that's the best use of the board meeting. So I think it's, you know, making sure your story is tight, getting the board material out for a pre-read, and then allowing for those really deep dive conversations during the dialogue.
Yeah, really great advice. My last question related to kind of your interaction with and your experience having been on the board is looking back, right? Would you have asked different kinds of questions to your operators, or what are the kinds of questions you wish your board would ask a revenue ops leader so that they could actually get the picture that they want?
When I was a banker and in private equity, one of the reasons why I decided to go back and try to be an operator is because there was so much about what I was working in and around that I didn't quite understand, because, you know, very early on in my career, I was just doing pitch decks and looking at metrics for some of these companies and really didn't quite understand how to build and grow a successful software company. So for me, I wanted to go build that experience so I could be a better investor. Now here I am, an operator, and done it for the last 10 years. So I've got the bug. But it's really, some of the best investors truly understand what it takes to scale. And it's not about, hey, here's your sales capacity model. We're going to throw more heads into this, and therefore we're going to grow top line revenue. But it's really the intricate components of what in the operation has to come together to drive sales capacity, to drive better attainment. And that just doesn't happen overnight, right? So if you were truly an operator, you would know that you need to have better enablement. You need to have better pitches. You need to get all of this together in a timely manner, especially when you're, you know, we just went through a period of like 3 years of companies growing at no cost, hyperscale. And like, that was the most important. And now you're going to see some of the best companies who know how to really run a business thrive through this challenging environment because they have the right operations and infrastructure set up to do that.
Wow. I think the valuable perspective you bring is to have experience on both sides. We more often see folks who've been on the operator side and then end up joining an investor to help other portcos. In your case, you came from the finance side and then you decided, let me roll up my sleeves and have an actual experience of what it means to scale and run a business. That's really cool.
Yeah. And, you know, I can't lie. I do get the urge and like the tickle to go back. And then I'll go through some of these processes and I'm like, wow, like I don't want to just consult on comp plans. I want to actually build the strategy and like the things that you get deep on every day as an operator, you don't get to do in those roles. And, you know, maybe someday in my career, after it's been, you know, 3 or 4 more good companies, you know, I'll go back and do it and I'll have some fun doing it. But right now, I love being in the weeds and being part of being a team and growing a business.
Yeah, that's so great. So I'd like to talk to you next about technology. And
Okay.
specifically, is there a tech stack tool at this point that you just can't live without?
So when I got to Formstack, I think we use every piece of technology you could ever want.
Yikes.
And we don't use any of them correctly. So obviously we're in this environment where we're trying to, bring our costs down in this new selling world we're in. So I was going through with a fine-tooth comb as I got here and going through this. So we don't need this, we don't need that. There was one that I found that you may not know of. It's called GradientWorks. And what we were using GradientWorks for at Formstack really isn't what I think the most valuable use of that is as they pivoted the business and got to spend some time with their CEO, Hayes, to learn more about this tool they call Book Builder. So effectively, it's dynamic book building that helps territory management and gives your reps the most high propensity to buy accounts at the right time and dynamically manages and takes accounts out. Something that I've been looking for my whole career, which is how do you get reps the right accounts at the right time and make sure that you have balanced books, all that stuff that we've been doing in spreadsheets forever, and having like a more regional focus or again, zip code focus, whatever you might have for territory management. These folks have done something I haven't seen yet before. So we are starting to pilot this with our new books as the new fiscal year rolls out, but I'm super excited to get into it and see how well it works.
Yeah, boy, I can't wait to have you back and ask for an update on that. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, no, that would be good. You probably asked me all the things I got rid of this year too, which would be fun.
And you think of how many companies go through go through Q4 and start their planning for whatever the go-to-market changes are for the new year, and maybe base territories or target accounts on incorrect information, out-of-date information. You're kind of only as good as the last enrichment unless you have a tool like what you described.
Yeah, and a lot of companies don't do it as frequently throughout the course of the year as you need to, right? Because it just becomes something that's rather static. So I thought it was pretty great idea that they built the technology to do that.
Sure. So staying in the realm of technology, I'm curious about for reporting, where do you go for an at-a-glance view of what's going on in the business?
You can ask me this question when we meet again too, and I'll have a better answer for you.
Okay.
But today I'm going into Salesforce. So all of our reporting comes out of Salesforce, and we've started to build our performance analytics very simply in Excel. We do use Looker, but Looker isn't it's not ramped up yet. And I hope to get to a point where we do have Looker built in a way that we're providing good snapshots of performance to the business. But today, I had a mentor along the way that said any good analyst can build what you have in Salesforce reports. So we're just pulling it down into Excel and making it look pretty.
No, I think that makes sense. That's great. And certainly your peers on the leadership team can do what they need to do when the data is pulled into Excel. They're just inherent challenges to the distribution model using Excel.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I think what we're doing right now in terms of managing our performance cadences, get everything in Excel. It updates every day. We run the models. We have nice dashboards, but we're putting those in PDFs and pushing them out to the business with insights, and then having cadences to manage some of the conversations that we want to point out. So it's the age-old way that I've seen to do it effectively, but there's other pieces of technology we can plug in to get ourselves a little bit more modern.
So I'm really curious, based on the last number of years and all you've seen in the different roles that you've had, I'm curious where you think we're going with RevOps, and in particular, what the next big disruption might be within the RevOps world.
I'm going to give you a couple here because I've been thinking a lot about this just in the back of my mind. I think the first thing is, as we continue to go through this, whatever recession might be or is going to come, folks are really thinking about net retention, right? If you look at the roles and backgrounds of a lot of great RevOps leaders, there's a lack of customer focus or customer ops focus. I think you're going to see a hard shift to more focus on the customer here in the next 12 to 18 months. And it's going to be really important to have that experience. And some of the best companies will be successful with that experience. The last thing is, this is my future state, which is probably 10 years out. I think you're going to see more CROs and executive leadership team members come from RevOps. And I say that because we touch everything. We know everything about the business. We understand marketing, we understand product, we understand sales, we understand finance most of the time. And if you can bring that all together, you become a really good executive operator. And I truly think that's the future state of what RevOps might go into.
Well, I think you're right. I think the early returns are showing us a number of folks that have stepped from VP of RevOps onto COO. We just have an example of CRO even just this week, hearing about that, which is so exciting. And then other leadership positions as well. So very, very exciting to see that. And it certainly makes sense why, based on what you've shared.
Yeah. I'm it's funny. If you asked me when I got out of college if I wanted to be in operations, I would have said, I don't know what that is. It's not like they teach you what RevOps or sales ops or any of these roles are. And if they did, I wouldn't have found myself there. So I'm just lucky that I've had the opportunities that I have.
Dan, you somehow anticipated some of the questions I had next, because I want to talk about your background. I want to talk about your customer ops, CS type experiences. Like you said, most of the folks, I think, both on the podcast as guests or even our audience, did not know about what ops was, or that was even a career or a function. So I want to hear about your path, Dan.
Okay.
You are based out of Boston. So that's where David and I are as well.
We're getting ready for this chilly cold coming our way.
We are so ready to be frozen. It was at like negative however many degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, frozen. But you've been in the area for a while because you got your BS in finance locally here at Bentley.
Yep.
And then your last few roles also, your previous position prior to joining Formstack, your VP of Global Customer Experience at Papaya Global. 2 roles ago, you were, or rather the role, 2 roles before Papaya, you were Managing Director of Revenue Operations and Customer Success at Penn Foster. So to your point earlier about most RevOps folks not coming from the customer side, they're most likely sales ops, I think to a smaller extent, marketing ops. I want to understand how you got into SaaS RevOps and what unique perspectives you think you bring because of that CS or customer operations background.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I've lived here in Boston my whole life, and it was a funny little joke, when you look for schools to go to college. I started in Florida and Texas, and geez, here I am back in Waltham, Massachusetts, which was 35 minutes from where I grew up. So a little bit of a creature of habit. Went to Bentley. I think, I've always pushed myself hard to be kind of a high performer and be the best at whatever I can do. And as I asked myself coming out of Bentley, what do you want to go do? Well, the best things at that time that they teach you about at school really are, investment banking, private equity, venture, management consulting, right? So I'm like, yes, this is what I'm going to go do. So I had this really unique opportunity. I worked through school. Joined a small growth equity firm called Brook Venture, learned a ton. And this is really where I got to sit across the table from operators and see the board perspective. Did that for a while and really ran the whole lead source to close process on the PE side, which is an amazing experience for someone. I was 21 at the time. Got a little excited to join a new firm that was called Bulger Partners at the time. Bulger Partners was taking this concept of more of a merchant bank, and it was a startup just focusing on software and the software economy. So did venture investing, did banking, and did consulting. So I was like, "What great! I could get all of this experience in one place." This is where I fell in love with the idea of being an operator. Banking, so you're doing 100-hour work weeks. Like there's no way around that. And you're doing pitch decks and you're putting sims together. It's, a lot of grunt work. I didn't really understand some of I wanted to go figure out how to grow those businesses from the other side. And the biggest moment I had was when I got on a plane. I'd never been to Europe, going out to bank to run a private capital raise for this great company at the time, which is funny. I'll tell a story when I come back to Papaya. And land on the ground, nervous because I'm 22 years old. I've never been to Europe. Don't know what I'm doing. It's my second real job. Get on the plane. We sit in a room for 3 hours. I'm jet lagged to the X capacity, right? It's great. The CEO goes, we're going to the Man U game. So we go, we have a box the Man U game, come back the next morning, and we're talking about the strategy. And like, he takes me over to the wall in this company, is their headquarters is in Sandbach, UK. And he says, this is our journey wall. He says, we want you to sign it. You're part of our journey. And at that moment, I was like, wow, I need to be part of something. And I didn't get that from banking and private equity. It wasn't part of like building a team or building something that you could be proud of. And that's when I knew that I needed to go be an operator, or just be, well, at that point, I didn't know what an operator was, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to go do finance in a company. And that's really what I did. So that led me to Penn Foster. Got to work directly for the CFO and help them build out a B2B kind of internal startup off their, I think it was like a $200 million direct to consumer ed tech company. So did that. I really, this is where I learned to be an athlete in operating companies and just go where you needed me, right? So in the early beginning, it was working with our private equity investors to build out the 5-year plan. Then it was go actually make that happen and build the operation to support that. I stood up at the time, it was sales ops, right? RevOps wasn't a concept. So I was the first person that was sales ops, and someone called me that. And I was like, why are you calling me that? I don't even know what that means. I'm just here trying to measure things and help us, get to our goals. Then we finally grew the business big enough. We got a president of the division, and he's a great mentor of mine, and I've learned so much from him. And he goes, hey, Dan, could you go build like a customer success function? I'm like, I don't know what customer success is. I guess I'll figure it out. So here I am listening, podcasts and reading as much as I can to figure out what customer success is, and really had the opportunity to stand that up from scratch. Looking back on it, it was a great experience to just, get in there, and we hired like 15 CSMs. Here I am, first time manager of that many people and growing and learning. And we had a really nice run. We sold that company to Bain Capital. And at that point, I was like, I don't know what I want to do next. And this is where I got introduced to this company called Duck Creek Technologies. And I didn't know anything about Duck Creek. I didn't know anything about insurance software. Duck Creek is a vertical SaaS company, right? And I think we've seen that trend in the market be really successful. So I came into Duck Creek and I met my boss, Eugene, who's the COO. And we just started talking about kind of this concept of go-to-market operations. Really was a novel idea at the time, but like, he was responsible for everything from lead to renewal. So how do you build a consistent operating structure and system across all of those departments, break down silos from systems and process? And that's really what we did. We had a hell of a run at Duck Creek. We're right in the middle of this perfect time to shift insurance companies to the cloud. The market was hot. We had a great IPO. I think we grew the company software ARR up to 160 million in like 3 years. Like it was a great run. And I learned a lot and have had a great team at that point at Duck Creek. I had a specialty sales function, which was an overlay sales function, which, I had some new revenue pressure and a renewals team. I had an SDR and BDR team and the whole ops function. So to my point in being an athlete, I've just always found ways to just, hey, whatever you need, I'll figure it out. And then we bring it to where it should be in your organization. Like obviously,
you're very good at jumping in the deep end of the pool. You're like,
yeah,
I haven't done this before, but it sounds like we need it. I guess I'll put it on my plate.
I mean, I think, sometimes to my detriment, that's because, you fall a little bit and you figure it out. But to positive, like that's how I've built my career. And I've generally I'm a generalist at the end of the day. Like I don't go super deep in any one area, but I know enough about everything to be dangerous. And I build a good team around me to go deep in certain areas where I'm weak. So at the end of Duck Creek, we've been a public company for 2 years. I was just not at the point where I was building anymore. And we were just kind of running the thing. And I just decided to want to do something different. I started to see this trend of customer success, how important that was going to be, especially at the end of my time at Duck Creek, as we focus on more customer experience and tying that through. And got an opportunity to work for a woman I've always wanted to work for, who'd been a mentor for me a very long time. She was over at Papaya and she was practically like chief customer officer. And she said, come over here and run this thing with me. This is a little bit of a rocket ship. Papaya was, is a great company. They're solving really, really great problems in the market. from a talent management perspective and a global talent management perspective with that. And got the opportunity to run a global team of like 165 people, which is way larger than I've ever had. So it really stretched me as a leader to try to be better and different in how you do things, and globally too, right? I was up at 5:30 in the morning on calls until 8 o'clock at night, and really stretched me to do things differently. So great experience. And then more recently here at Formstack, where I've got the opportunity to go a little bit deeper on marketing ops, which I think that's, if you think about my background, that's a little bit, when I think of majors and minors, that's been a minor for me. So I think one of our biggest things at Formstack is how do we rebuild our demand gen models so that we can go up market with a lot of these super PLG-led company, right? How do we go and monetize some of those 25,000 customers that we have through enterprise vertical solutions?
Yeah, that's definitely a theme we're hearing about in a lot of our customer base, trying to introduce more of that PLG motion. How do we capitalize on existing subscribers? While we're on the topic, can you quickly tell the audience what does Formstack do?
We automate work. So what's great about Formstack is we are this great platform that can tie all of your systems together, populated with data. We find ourselves really strong in healthcare verticals. We find ourselves in education really, really well, also with software companies. The funny thing about Formstack is we actually used it at Papaya, and I got to see the power of it from an operations perspective, truly tying the whole process together across systems, populating that data down and just being really seamless. And also from a customer perspective, we had materials going out to customers and coming back in with the right data. It's a really good product, and that was why I was excited to join here.
That's so powerful to hear when a customer goes to join a company.
Yeah,
just has that knowledge of the other side. So
yeah, it's the first time that
powerful.
I've done that, and it was really refreshing because I've joined these companies that I've, Duck Creek, I've never worked in an insurance company, so I'd never used an insurance core system, so I didn't really know much about that. But yeah, I got to really use the Formstack platform as a customer and saw the value of, like, this is a no-brainer to go join this thing.
So Dan, I'm really curious, given the many roles that you've shared in your background, really kind of an amazing progression through your career, what's on your career bucket list?
Oh, good question. I think about this a lot. I think I just want to be someone who runs the company. I just love running the company and solving the problems, right? So whether that be, a COO title, or maybe who knows, maybe I'll be a chief revenue title. I've always been a little bit scared of owning the whole number myself, but that's growth. Or maybe a chief customer officer. I don't know, but I do want to find myself in a place where I have an influence on how we run the business and where we go strategically. Maybe someday after it's all said and done, I do go back to the other side and maybe do some portco work at a venture or private equity firm and kind of complete the circle. But I think I've got some time before that happens.
I suspect you'll be running a business before too long.
We'll see. We've got a lot to do at Formstack, so that's what I'm focused on first.
Yeah, that's great. So in the meantime, leading a RevOps team can be pretty intense. I'm curious, what do you do to unwind?
Good question. So I've got a great wife. We've been together for almost 10 years. So she helps me kind of manage my ups and downs on a regular basis. She is a healthcare professional. So she reminds me, Dan, you're selling software and you're not saving lives. She helps me put that to perspective. Yeah, we've got two great little dogs that sit next to me all day that kind of keep me checked. But outside of work, and I like to play golf. So we're going down to Mexico for a revenue kickoff. I've loaded up my sticks. They're ready to go. I'm going to go hit some golf balls while we're down there. So that'll be fun. And, it might be simple, but in the summer, I really like yard work and riding the lawnmower, right? It's just simple. Nice. We lived downtown Boston for, 7 years or so. And it was just refreshing to be able to move up here a couple of years ago and have, a couple acres of land that I could just go do whatever I want to do in.
Yeah, that's great. I can sympathize with that sentiment a lot. So that's really great.
Yeah, no, it's good. Being a RevOps leader is a lot of fun during the day, and you got to find ways to disconnect a little bit because you are so plugged in all the time.
You mentioned along the way, as you adopted new functions, as you took on different roles, as you kind of just got nudged into taking on CS or sales ops or whatever it was, that you listened to podcasts, read books. I'm wondering, what are some of those go-to resources for you today in RevOps? Be that people you admire in RevOps that you like to follow on LinkedIn or elsewhere, communities you're a part of where you do your learning, or resources, books, podcasts, etc. What would you recommend the audience to check out?
Yeah. So, I've had a lot of success early in my career, and that's, I always found for me, it was time was against me. Like that was the only thing I was solving for, because I had never been a 20-year plus veteran at leading ops or whatever it was at the time. So I had to go learn from people who had that perspective. So love podcasts. I love doing in my run is how I get through them every day. Sean Lane is really good from Drift, from an ops perspective. And I love a lot of the content that OpenView Ventures puts out there. So I know a lot of those folks pretty well, and they just got rock solid content and they're producing a ton of it. So super helpful to us. I've got my books over there. I'm looking at them. One of my favorite books is The $1 Trillion Man. It's about Bill Campbell's story. It was written by Eric Schmidt. So that's really good. And obviously High Output Management. It's the Andy Grove book. As an operator, you've got to have that on your shelf. And then you've got, what else do I got? The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So that's Andreessen. That's a good one. I actually might read that on the plane on Monday.
That's a solid reading list right there.
They're good. They're good. Like those are I always find myself going back to, High Output Management. Oh, the other one too, I forgot, Extreme Ownership. So that's Chuck and Lori. Yes, very good, right? So whenever I join a new company and I'm bringing a team, there's a couple of books that I make them read, or make them read. One is Mindset by Carol Dweck. Super, just like, we need growth mindset as operators. Like, we're always getting better. You can't have a fixed mindset. It's like, if you're an operator with a fixed mindset, you may as well just go retire, because you're not going to get anything done. And then obviously Extreme Ownership. Own your business, do what you got to do to get it done and be accountable to it. So those are two of my favorites. Just remembered as I looked over there.
I just remembered, I can hear Jocko's voice in my head being like, whose fault is this?
Exactly. And it's probably my fault, because I didn't reflect back on that. Right. So
right.
They're really powerful books. And it's good to just get new folks aligned on kind of what is that culture you're going to build from a leadership perspective. And some people like it, some people don't, but hey, figure it out.
Great recommendations. Last but not least, where can people find you, Dan?
You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to spend time with anyone who's interested. A lot of folks have given time to me in the past, so I'm more than happy to give back and help you, whether it's about thinking about what's next or solving a problem or whatever it might be. I think my email's on there, but you can also get me at Formstack. So dan.swimmer@formstack.com.
Amazing. Thank you for the generous offer for folks to reach out to you. And if folks want to look into Formstack more or look into your open positions, where can they find that?
They should be on our careers page of Formstack, but if you are interested and see something you like, just send me a direct note and we'll get you involved.
Amazing. And that's formstack.com.
You got it.
Awesome.
Dan, it's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many nuggets from today's show, starting with, it just doesn't have to be perfect. And I think a lot of us hurt ourselves by striving for perfection when it just doesn't have to be. So great advice there. So many nuggets from your background. And
we're not finance people. Remember that. It's okay to be, we don't have to round. We can be 80% of the way right.
Yeah. I think, that's great. So we really appreciate you taking the time, spending it with us here on the podcast and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and this is a great podcast. So I'm happy to be a part of it. And if there's anything I can do to help those of you that are interested in learning more, please let me know.
Amazing. And we also want to thank the audience today who's been listening. If you learned something, if you've got a book that now you've added to your next Amazon shopping list, please tell someone about the podcast, share the resources. Sharing is love. Thank you again, Dan, for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great to spend a lot of time with you guys over the last couple of weeks.
Awesome. And this has been another exciting, insightful, unexpected, full of gems episode of RevOps Rockstars. See you next time.
Stay classy, Rockstars. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. For show notes and other episodes, visit RevOpsRockstars.com. RevOps Rockstars is sponsored by OpFocus. Visit opfocus.com to learn more about how OpFocus helps SaaS companies scale their revenue operations.